Hello viewers, Super GT here. In today's video, we're going to ask the question, which is better? This bad boy, the controller, or this bigger bad boy, the wheel? Definitely the wheel. Now I've made the transition from the controller to the wheel. I think it's a good time now to finally try and demonstrate which one is the best out of the two. So we're going to do two tests. The first one is a no tyre wear test. So we're going to drive around the track 10 times with no tyre wear and see which one is quickest, and then we're going to do it with tyre wear and see how they compare. Let's get straight into the first test. Okay, so for this test, or for these tests, I'm going to be using the Nurburgring Grand Prix circuit. Now this is a track that I feel fairly confident around, which is why I've chosen it really. The fact that I think it's probably my favourite combination, so I can lap quite well on both controller and wheel. Using the Porsche 911 RSR in Group 3. So this combination is probably our best combination, Group 3 at the Nurburgring. So let's see how they compare. McLaren GT3 Fanatec wheel on the left, and you've got the dual shock on the right hand side. So using different views of course, as just using whichever view I'm most comfortable with on the respective input method. So with the wheel, hood view, or roof cam, whatever you want to call it, and on the right hand side chase cam with the controller. So let's see which one is the quickest here in a straight up 10 lap race, no tyre wear to worry about and no fuel to worry about either, just straight up dash to the end. And you can see here at the beginning the controller actually marginally ahead already at the first split. In the middle of the screen at the top, you can see, or you will see, the lap times. So obviously haven't done any yet, although we're going to come up to the end of the first lap here and enter our first lap. So actually the controller actually already ahead at this point, crossing the line first with the 201.9, and then 1 second later with the 202.9 is the wheel. So a good start for the controller there actually. 1 lap later, very similar lap times. Very low 57s, 57.1 for both cars, and then next time around, very similar lap times once again, although the wheel 1/10 quicker. I think the wheel's actually got a bit of a disadvantage to kind of reel in after that lap 1 second down after lap 1, so it's got quite a lot of work to do to catch up, although it does look very, very close at this point. So let's see how they tackle the complex at the beginning of the Nürburgring lap. So both look hooked up at this point here. So of course, absolute optimum conditions with maximum tyres, tyre grip, no fuel to have to worry about. So this is as good as it gets really in terms of grip for both. But still at this point, the controller is still ahead and looking as though very, very, very confident indeed. Okay, so we're going to skip a little bit forwards towards the end of lap 7, and you can see here actually it's pretty much neck and neck as they go into the final turn at the end of the lap. The lap time's still very, very consistent indeed. Rounding out the final turn up to the line, what is it going to be? And actually you see here the wheel has actually overtaken the controller by this point, entering the quickest lap of the race so far, 56.4 for the wheel. At the end of lap number 9 then, so we're coming up really towards the end of the race, and the controller makes a big fight back here with a 56.3. Now that's the quickest lap of the race so far, and actually goes ahead as we begin the final lap of 10. So just one more lap left to go. The controller having a slight advantage at this point. I think the wheel has done very well to bring it back after getting quite a poor lap 1, losing a second on the first lap, but then having a lot of very consistent laps in a row. I mean, if you look at the lap times there on the left hand side, from lap 3 till lap 9, all within half a second of each other, mostly within 0.3. And then on the right hand side, a little bit less consistent, but still really rather fast. And actually the controller with the faster lap overall at this point. Although we must say it's actually very, very close between the two. As we come down the hill towards the hairpin, let's see which one gets on the brakes first. It's going to be the controller, so still that gap is very, very small. and after nearly 20 minutes of racing, this is actually incredibly close between the two. And the wheel goes purple, so the wheel is on for a purple lap here. So on course to beat it's 56.4. As we come up then towards the very tricky left-right hairpin leading onto the back straight here. Still sense the controller is marginally ahead, although not by much. Maybe about a tenth or not even that. Coming out onto the back straight, what is that split time going to be? Marginally down on the wheel, half a second down on the controller. Not a good lap for the controller. As we come up towards the final chicane, this is where things can really change. Braking just before the 100 board on both. Abusing those track limits as much as possible. And coming up towards the final turn, this is really close indeed. It's going to be extremely close up to the line. Who is going to get the best exit out of this final turn? It looks as though the controller has won it by, what is that, less than a car length. That is ridiculously close. The wheel setting the quickest lap of the race there, 56.1 on the final lap. You see the time difference there. 1/10 or less than a tenth between the two at the end after 19.5 minutes of racing. That was ridiculously close. Okay, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Turns out that the wheel and the controller pretty much evenly matched. In fact, the controller was actually quicker on that 10-lap run there. So it looks like I've wasted money on my rig. Only one way to sort this out, and that's eat an Easter egg, obviously. Okay, so let's go to a comparison between the fastest lap of the wheel and on the controller. So on the left-hand side, the fastest lap is a 56.199 or 156.199. So you can see they're starting at exactly the same time. And on the right-hand side, the controller has a 56.3. So there's only really a tenth difference. Now the main thing I kind of analysed from this really was, I think in optimum conditions, I think I can be pretty much the same speed. Mainly because I think this track is one of my favourites, and I felt quite good on this on the controller. I think around other tracks it might actually be a little bit trickier on the controller. This is where the controller struggles really, through this kind of corner on the exit, when you're accelerating and still turning, which you kind of have to do there. That's where the controller struggles much more than the wheel, I think. Even though it looked quite fine there, it's much easier to get it all wrong and start, violently fishtailing. That's where the threat comes. But I think as long as you're within the limits, I think both are actually very, very similar indeed, the controller and the wheel. It's just perhaps the ultimate, let's say, the upper ceiling is actually a little bit higher with the wheel. I think the absolute fastest you can go is a little bit high, is a little bit more on the wheel. You can actually get slightly quicker times with the wheel overall. But I think as long as you practice a lot, the controller is definitely up there on pace. You've seen the likes of M. Thomas, Kalster, very, very fast players, and they were using the controller. Or Kalster still does, I think. But Matt Thomas now moving to the wheel, but he was really doing bits when he was using the controller. He was absolutely flying on that thing. So it's definitely possible to be very, very fast indeed. Coming towards the final chicane, it looks pretty much neck and neck through. I think the wheel actually gets a better exit, and that's the other thing I'll definitely analyse. Is really just getting on the throttle. It's just a lot easier to do on the wheel compared to the controller. That's where the main difference, I think, is between the two of them. So up to the line there it is. Not much difference at all. That's the difference between 1/10 of a second. It's hardly anything, but that is all it was at the end. Okay, so now we go on to the second test, which is based on tyre wear. So you see there tyre wear 10 times, and we got fuel times 1. Okay then, here we go then. So this one's going to be a little bit different. So same track, same car, but the thing we're going to really take note of here is what you see at the top of the screen, which is the tyres. So at the start of the race, it starts white and then it gradually goes down with the red bar. So at the end of lap 1, you see actually already the controller beginning to wear out a little bit more on those front tyres. At the end of the next lap, even more tyre wear. So just for reference, I'm using front bias -2 on this test and on the previous test on both cars, so it's exactly the same. So similar lap times there between the two of them, so both 57.7. So at this point here, the tyres haven't completely shredded to 1,000 billion pieces. So actually, still fairly easy to drive at this point. Let's see how they both contend with this first sector. You see just how close they are. So this is actually the third lap now, and not too much difference between the two of them in terms of where they are on the circuit. Maybe the wheel just edging away slightly by half a second or so. This is a lot later into the race, or actually at the end of that lap. You see just how bad the tyre wear is now on the controller, and how far ahead the wheel is now, maybe a couple of seconds at least, and maybe a few hundred metres. And the tyre wear, I mean, it's just a really different story completely. This is a lot later now into the race, around about the 7th lap, and you can see just how bad. You can see just how bad. It's really just not even. It's not even similar. It's just not even the same ballpark. The tyre wear on the controller is just a million times worse. And you can see from the first test, I was able to drive the car very, very consistently and in a very, very similar speed. And I'm trying to do the same here, but it just isn't really working. The tyre wear just is so much worse, even though I'm really trying to make it or drive it smoothly as possible. So coming up towards the chicane for the wheel, coming up towards the final corner then, you can see just how far ahead the wheel has got by this point, a good 10 seconds or so as it goes through the final turn of the lap, and then finally the controller comes through the chicane. So a massive gap forming by this point, and you can see there the wheel finishes and the controller's still having to go around the final turn. So a massive gap, finishing in 19 minutes 52 seconds, so about 19 seconds slower than what we did without the tyre wear. And then eventually the controller finishes over 10 seconds later. So over the course of 20 minutes we lost 10 seconds, or no, 15 seconds compared to the wheel. So that is the really big difference. You see here, this is the controller, and it's coming out of that kind of turn there. So it looked quite easy, but that's because I was holding back, because I just have that fear that the car is going to slide. So as long as you drive within the limits, it's kind of okay, but it's very easy when you've got no tyres to overstep the mark. So you're having to really underdrive here just to keep the car in control. You see there, the car is just really getting all out of hand. And this is the same section on the same lap. So with the wheel, the car is so much easier to control, mainly because obviously the tyres are still there. I've actually still got some life in the tyres. And the fact that I think with the wheel, because it's so much smoother, when you're on less grip, when things get a little bit tough, it's just so much easier to control on the pedals and on the wheel. So there's a comparison of the lap times. You can see with the wheel on the left hand side, I only went above 2 minutes on the final lap, and I made a big mistake at the chicane on that lap. Whereas on the controller, by lap 6 I was already over 2 minutes, and then it just went downhill quite quickly from there. So massive difference. So the first lap, you can see that lap 2, sorry, very, very similar indeed, 57.7. But then after that, it just went really downhill very quickly. But there we go. It was quite an interesting test actually, and it turns out that I think when you're at optimum settings, so no tyre wear in a car and a track that you know how to drive, and a track that you're confident around, it seems as though they're actually very, very similar. You can see there from the first test, they after 20 minutes of racing, it was within 1/10 between the wheel and the controller, so really, really close. But things start to go wrong for the controller with tyre wear, and I was really trying to drive exactly the same. You can see that with the no wear test, I was driving exactly the same, pretty much. And then when it came to tyre wear, the tyre wear was just absolutely, it was like twice as bad, and I felt as though I was driving exactly the same. That is where the controller seems to fall down massively. When things go wrong, it's much easier on the wheel. So if you start sliding, it's easier to correct it on the wheel than it is on the controller. So I think when you're driving within your comfort level, within the limits, they're both very, very similar. But as soon as you start overstepping the mark on the controller, it just becomes that little bit harder to control. So that's definitely something I've noticed, which might not have been apparent in the video. The other thing really is not just my own experience, it's just looking at what other players do. For the FIA finals last year, barely any of the players who were there qualified with a controller. There are some who are very, very good on the controller, but the absolute majority of people who qualified for the FIA events on Gran Turismo would have done so on a wheel. So it kind of tells you that that's all you need to know. I think the main thing really is just on the wheel. It's just everything is so much smoother. You can steer a lot smoother. You can press the throttle, press the brake a bit smoother. So that's the main difference. And Gran Turismo really does lend itself to smoothness. If you can drive smoothly, then you're going to be successful, and especially with that tyre wear. But you know, there we go. Turns out I didn't waste all that money on that rig in the end. Maybe the wheel was a solid investment. I hope you found the video in some way useful or entertaining or whatever. If you did, consider subscribing for more of the same. And obviously smashing that like button. That's the most important thing you'll do today. Anyway, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my egg. Thank you so much for watching. Recommend more of these types of videos for me to do in the future. And I'll see you next time. Goodbye.